Today, I thought I would talk a bit about a couple of very important themes around submission and how, as men, what submission can teach us is an important lesson around letting go of control. And part of this is was sponsored by reading a couple of different books. Um, The Surrender Experiment by Michael Fisher and The Tao of Abundance by Lawrence Bolt. I'm going to actually have an article coming out around some of the reflections that I've had around the surrender experience. But one thing that really stood out to me was something that the author said when he said like that, people look at surrender as a form of weakness, but it actually takes real strength to surrender. And I've really been experiencing that a lot this last week. It's been a very profound experience. Before I get into all that, I want to welcome you, Christian, to here. Thank you for being on here. Feel free to comment or ask questions or anything, or if anything comes up as I'm sharing here. I always respond to people who are with me live here on Substack and appreciate the fact that you're here right now. But today I'm gonna read a passage to you from the Tao of Abundance, and then I want to reflect on that a bit. And I'm going to also tell you a bit about an upcoming class that I have coming out in December called Say Yes, which kind of reflects some of this stuff. But first, let's talk about the quote. So in this book, he says the following. Oh yeah, Christian, thank you for commenting. Yay! I love it when people comment and stuff. Yeah, thank you for being here. Many of us take pride in what giving people we are. Yet it seldom occurs to us to consider how receptive we are. Certainly, receptivity is not promoted as a cultural idea in the way of giving is. In the West, we often equate giving with being generous and spiritual, and receiving with being selfish and greedy. In truth, giving often provides an ego gratification that receiving doesn't allow. When we are giving, we are in control in a way that we are not when we're receiving. Receiving requires a humility and letting go that can make us feel uncomfortable. Often we feel much more secure when we think we are in control, running the show. Now, I think that this is a universal truth, but I'm going to speak to it from the perspective as a men's transformation coach in working with and connecting with other men. As a man, that just strikes me. Like I read that passage this morning and I'm like, yeah, that's been me for so much of my life. I felt the need to be in control, even though really, a lot of times what I've really had is the illusion of control. I think something that really kind of struck me this last week is that I started reading the Surrender Experiment about a week or so ago. And the author was talking about how, like, he one day had this realization that the voice in his head was not him. The voice in his head was like all the thoughts and the commentary and everything else, but that it wasn't actually him. And he took this step back and started observing it and seeing all the ways that he was trying to control everything. And that's what led him on to this 40-year experience of just surrendering, where he was like, I'm going to surrender to whatever comes my way. Can you imagine even doing that? I mean, the truth of the matter is the idea of surrendering yourself to an experience, surrendering, every day, that takes a lot of strength. Not everyone can do it, or at least they don't think they can do it. I suspect actually more people could do it if they knew that actually they would be well taken care of. Sheena, welcome. Glad to have you here. Um, always good to have more people join us on here. So this is something that I've really been doing this past week as an experiment, since starting to read that book, and then reading this today kind of just further reinforced it. I've just surrendered, and I have felt a level of calmness and clarity in the surrendering that I haven't felt before. And it's funny because I mean I've had this experience of surrender A lot, actually, honestly, if I'm saying in the last decade, at different points in time. I've had moments where I've had to surrender, where I've definitely felt like I haven't been in control. But the thing that I've always done is that once I got through that situation where I surrendered and let go of control and accepted like I don't have control here, and things started to go back to normal, what did I do? I put my hands back on the steering wheel and started driving again. And, lo and behold, I get caught up in the illusion of control. And it makes a lot of sense. Men are told they need to be in control. They need to lead. They need to show up. I mean, I see this advice put out there all the time, not just on Substack. I see it on Instagram. I see it on Facebook. I see it everywhere. Not just from other men. I see it from plenty of women who are saying, like, I just want him to take control. I want him to show me that he's got it all together. What a lot of pressure to put on a man. He's got to be in control. He's got to make her feel safe. But also what a lot of pressure it's putting on the man in regards to himself. And I want to be very clear here. I'm not blaming men or women for all this. I'm really just looking at society as a whole. That Western society as a whole has this notion that we have to be in control. And so we struggle with receiving. I sit in a men's circle, and one of the things that stands out to me about that is one of the topics we end up talking about is receiving. And all the men in that circle, myself included, have in one form or another shared how they've struggled with receiving. Giving, hey, great, I can give. That's fine. That's perfect. Receiving, though, no, no, no. Can't receive. I'm supposed to go. I'm supposed to go it alone. I'm supposed to do it all by myself. I want to encourage you to take a different approach to receiving, to welcome receiving, to see receiving as a benefit of whatever it is that you've done, but also just the capacity to fully receive the provision of the universe, the provision of the abundance of what is around us. And and I get that some people might say, well, what abundance? Like everything right now is chaotic and crazy and everything else. I guess that's kind of my point, because if we look, so much of the chaos in the world is really about people trying to have control. Without getting too much into the politics, if we look at like the political situation and how people are like really polarized on either end, it's really about people trying to be in control. And how's that working for us? It's not. It's created more division than anything else. That's all I'm going to really say about it, but it's just something worth noting. We look at this concept of control in our lives, just look at it on a personal level. Where is it that you're trying to have control? What are you trying to have control over? For men, especially, this becomes an issue because we all honestly in some ways aren't really even given permission to explore what it would be like to surrender control. If the idea is that as a man, you're supposed to provide, that you're supposed to protect, that you're supposed to take care of things, that you're supposed to always be active in getting things done, wow, I have to be in control. The idea of receiving becomes a very hard idea to take in, because receiving means that I'm giving up control. It means that that I'm not showing up in a way that is deemed masculine. Before I continue on, if either of you have questions or comments, feel free to drop those in. I'm happy to read them aloud and answer them. I always do that with these live broadcasts. So take that in for a moment, that we have the capacity to receive. All of us have the capacity to receive, men or women. And let me be very clear here. Receptivity is not inherently feminine any more than giving is inherently masculine. They're human expressions. They're not gendered expressions. And I think this is part of where our problem comes is that we gender everything. Well, he's in his feminine when he submits. No. Submission is a human experience if that's something you want to enjoy and explore. Just as dominance is a human experience. And they have their shadow sides. Of course they have their shadow sides. But that shadow side isn't inherently masculine or feminine. It's just a human expression. And I get why we gender everything that we do because it's a very convenient way to categorize stuff. If I say to you, "Oh, you're in your masculine or you're in your feminine," it becomes really easy to categorize you. But I think it makes it harder to actually explore what it means to be a man or a woman. And when I work with my clients, one of the things that I really look at is like, how can we separate out the stereotypes around what a given behavior is and actually explore what that behavior means to this person as a person. Now, I'm gonna briefly plug my class that's coming up on December 11th. I have a class called Sacred Yes that's coming up, and in this class, we're going to be exploring um, this concept of masculine submission and what it means to say yes to yourself from a place of sovereignty. Because here's the deal: we talk about submission. I'm not talking about like nice guy behaviors and codependency or anything like that. I'm talking about a conscious choice to surrender control and approach life from a place of receptivity, but also still in responsiveness, but also taking action. And there is a lot of juice and power for that for men who want to explore it. And we often don't give ourselves permission to do that. So if that's something that fascinates or interests you, feel free to drop a comment below, and I can get you the link right here and now. It might take me a moment. I might have to look over at the computer and then type it in, but I can do that, or Sheena can actually, because she could probably get the link in there. But we can do that. So the thing is that we don't have to submit, so to speak, to certain standards. We can actually explore what it means to be a submissive man and what submission might look like. And even if you're just curious about submission, this could be a fun class to go to. Like, even if you come out of it being like, yeah, that's not what really for me, at least you'll know that. And let me be very, very clear. I'm not just talking about submission from a DS dynamic or a sexual dynamic. I'm really looking at it from a perspective of how can this help me become a healthier person? How can I be a healthier man, for example, by learning how to receive, by learning, for example, how to ask for help, learning that I don't always need to be in control. I was also reading an article today from another Substacker, Jim Chastain, and he was talking about how young men are learning how to share what they need help with and how this is actually helping them build confidence. Now, as a 49-year-old man, let me just share with you that I never really asked for help for a long, long time because I was always taught you go it alone. That's what being a man means. You go it alone, you figure it out. But eventually, I threw that aside. I learned, and I've even been told by different people in my life how atypical this is. Even now, I learned to ask for help. Like, I go into a grocery store, if I'm looking for something, I'll ask for help to find it because I don't want to stay in the grocery store all day, and I don't need to put on a performance of ego and be like, "Yep, I've got it all figured out. I know where the pineapples are, or I know where the beans are, or where the tomatoes are." No, if I don't know where they are, I'm just going to ask for help. It costs me nothing to ask for help and if I'm worried that it does, then really, let's be honest here. What I'm really worried about is I'm worried about the good opinion of other people. So if I go and I talk to that person who's stocking the shelf and I'm worried about their opinion of me, like what am I really doing? I'm actually giving away my own sense of power and presence to that person. And they probably don't even care. They're just there doing their job. They'd probably be happy to help out because it gives them something to do. So I ask for help. And I've learned to ask for help over the years, and I've gotten more assertive about asking for help. And this may seem odd, like, okay, you're a submissive man and you're talking about asking for help, but isn't the whole point of submission that you're like surrendering and not being assertive and like not being active in any way, shape, or form? No, that's not what submission is. If anything, submission for me has been an act of assertive, has actually called on me to be more assertive than I've ever been in my life. If I'm not willing to speak up for what I need help with or what I need, then yeah, I can't really expect that I'm going to get that help. And I'll share a case in point. This coming weekend, I'm going away to a training. And the reason I'm going away I wasn't going to originally go to that training. And the reason I'm going to that training is that I asked for what I wanted. I said, hey, to the people who are organizing it, hey, I'd be willing to come and share some social media posts, do some other things that like can help with this organization. And, I'm willing to do that. And this is what I want in return. And the answer I got in the end was yes, we're willing to let you do that. We'll need to approve whatever you do, and you need to make sure you have permission of the people there. But the point is that I asked for what I wanted, and I'm able to go to this experience that would have otherwise, cost me $500. I'm getting to go to this experience for no cost because I asked. I asked for what I wanted. And I chose to receive. Thank you, Sheena, for posting that there, the link there at the bottom. And it'll also be in the post later on. So, submission and surrender is not a passive experience per se. I mean, it can be, but I think one of the problems that I see in general is that there's just like this idea of like how people in general are supposed to show up. We're supposed to just give. Well, giving is important. And I think that when we can give from a place of generosity, that's a good thing to do. And honestly, the interesting thing is a lot of times what I see is that people struggle with giving a lot of times because they are worried that they don't have enough of their own resources or whatever else. And so if they do give, they'll give from a place of like resentment as opposed to giving from a place of conscious awareness. And the giving has more to do, honestly, in a way of bolstering themselves up as opposed to just being like, hey, I see this person's in need and I can help them out. Or it's a way of one upping that person. Well, this person needs help. I can help them out. And then therefore I'm better than them or whatever. Like, let's just surrender all of that. Let's surrender the ego here. And this is what submission and surrender is teaching me about letting go of control again and again and again. Sheena said, yeah, giving from resentment isn't sexy and she always knows. Right. She always knows. She always knows. Actually, I would say in general, people probably always know, male or female. Like, think about a time when you've given something and you haven't really wanted to give it. And people know. It's not sexy. It's not attractive. So what I would really offer to people who are watching this, whether you're watching it live or recorded, is that there is a real power in surrendering control. There is real power in discovering the importance of letting go. When we stop needing to be in control of everything, then that's when we actually begin to fully experience, we begin to experience a fullness to life. And I share that really because this last week I've experienced that in so many different levels. Last night, I came out into the kitchen. I have a roommate who lives with me, and I found that one of the spatulas was broken. I would have gotten really upset about it in the past. I mean, it was a spatula that I had. And I was just like, okay, it's broken. He comes out later and he says, I'm sorry about that. It got broken. And I just said to him, I said, well, very calmly, I said, okay, well, if you can replace it, I would really appreciate that. He said, yeah, I could do that. And I left it at that. I let it go. I didn't feel the need to hold that over his head. He'll replace it. And I trust him to do that. And I can receive him replacing that. What I did is I surrendered control. I surrendered the need to be in control of him. I surrendered the need to be in control of the situation. I asked for what I wanted. Very reasonable request. And I didn't punish him or hold it over his head like it happened. Like what would be the point? And I've had all these other little experiences where I've just surrendered control and I found that things have just kind of effortlessly come my way. Where before I was so stressed out, I was stressed about having control and like, oh, like I need things to be this way. And things weren't being the way that I wanted them to be. And I was holding on tighter and tighter and tighter and trying to control. It didn't work. We can surrender our control. And when we surrender our control, we can come to a level of peace and presence within ourselves that extends outward into the world around us and into the lives around us. And I think for men in particular, we can learn a lesson from this that we don't always need to be in control to be in our masculine. Being in our masculine isn't always about being active or hard or other things. Being in our masculine is really about being able to respond to what's around us. And I use the word respond as opposed to react because reaction is coming from control and is often usually it's a reaction that's both to the internal pressures and narratives and triggers and all that other stuff as well as to the world around us, whereas respond is I'm choosing my response. So using the spatula incident as a good example, I could have reacted, and I had a moment of reaction. I'm not gonna tell you I didn't. I did. I felt a bit of irritation. I'm like, "Ugh, really?" And it's just like, okay, what's this getting me? It's not really getting me anything. And so I was like, I'm gonna let this go. I'm gonna surrender the irritation. And it wasn't that I wasn't going to bring up the spatula or anything like that. Because definitely, and this is part of the whole assertion thing, I need to be assertive, but it was that I chose my response to the situation. I got to choose. And when we consciously choose, this gives us power. This gives us presence. And this is true regardless of what kind of relationship dynamic you're in and what you're choosing. So when I choose to respond to a situation, I have power and presence. And this is why this Substack is called Sovereign Submission, because I'm in my sovereignty when I submit. I'm in my sovereignty when I choose to respond. I haven't given away my power. What I've done is I've chosen to surrender the expression of power as a form of control, and I've chosen to step into presence. And this creates a deeper, more meaningful experience for all involved. And it creates an erotic juice and an erotic flow that is powerful and potent. And then can have this experience. We can have the experience where we fully receive the creativity and the abundance of the universe. We don't always have to be out there striving. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a time to strive. There definitely is. Otherwise, I wouldn't be putting on a class called Sacred Yes, right? I'm obviously putting some effort out there. I'm obviously doing some things to get something to happen or not happen, as the case may be. But it's going to be, regardless of whatever happens, I am putting effort out there, and then I'm receiving whatever comes my way from that. And I'm doing it from a place of peacefulness and presence. So remember that. You don't always have to strive to succeed. And when you do strive from a place of conscious response instead of from reaction, from control. I think that I'll leave this, or I'll end this on a parting note now, which is that the more that men think they need to be in control, the more they're actually operating from a place of reaction. And really, this isn't even just true of men. This is just true of people in general. The more a person, man or woman or otherwise identified, tries to be in control, the more they actually don't have control. They have the illusion of control. But when I surrender the illusion of control and I surrender the idea that I can control everything around me and everyone around me and instead just choose to respond from a place of calmness and surrender, there is this really beautiful expression that comes out of it. The world becomes a lot easier to live in. So that's what I leave you with. And I thank Christian and Sheena for being on here. Thank you for being here. And for those of you who are watching this recorded, I invite you to check out my class Sacred Yes, which is going to be happening on December 11th. And we're going to be exploring these concepts and doing some somatic embodied practices as well around this so that you can see like this is what it's like to experience surrender. And this is how I, as a man, can actually embody this and welcome it into my life. I thank you for being on here and have a wonderful rest of your day.